Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for Closing the Wealth Gap. The one show, maybe the only show, that shows you how to close the wealth gap in your own life with the man who's done it for many, our wealth coach himself, Tyrone French. Hey, Tyrone.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Closing the Wealth Gap. I'm your host, Tyrone French. Hey, what I'd like for you to do is go to our website, closingthewealthgap.net. I want you to hit that follow button. Also, what I'd like you to do is download my digital business card. It's an app. All you have to do is text Tyrone French to 36260. Text Tyrone French to 36260. Or you can just type in your browser, www.tyronefrench.coach. Matter of fact, every time we do another podcast, if you have my app on your phone, all you have to do is hit the podcast button, and bingo, presto, the podcast is right there. That being said, I'm excited about today's show. This is the first show of the year with Mr. Paul Roberts.
Yes.
And, man, I'm excited to be here, Paul. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. You know, sun's shining. People are feeling good after a rainy couple of weeks here. I'm hoping that it is still going to rain. It's going to rain information today.
Man, but I love the rain.
Do you really?
I absolutely love
You're
it.
a Californian. You're born and raised here. Grow up where I did, where it never stops raining or snowing or whatever. You never want to see it again.
Hey, man, I tell you what, though, there was a time when I hated the rain. I absolutely hated the rain.
I hate the rain.
And let me tell you a story.
Okay.
I was about maybe 10 years old, and, man, it was raining like cats and dogs. And it had been raining for like 3 or 4 days. And so in the front of our house, you had these storm drains.
Yeah.
And what down from each corner, we had the storm drain. So this particular time, it was the storm drain was the water was traveling to the east.
Okay.
And it was a torrent. Just a torrent,
I've
man.
seen it.
And I had a popsicle stick. And what I did was I took this popsicle stick and I threw it in the current. And I just watched the stick just bob up and down in this current. And all of a sudden I'm imagining that the stick was a battleship.
Oh, geez.
And so I'm jumping in the water, and and the stick is going down, is bobbing up and down, and finally it went down into the storm drain.
Right.
Well, I guess it took maybe 5 minutes or something to do this, but I'm soaking wet, man.
Yeah.
And I go home and I knock on the door, and my mother opened the door, and to me this was like one of the best days of my life.
Mom,
Man, she looked at me.
have you lost
Have
your
you
mind?
lost
son?
your mind?
What is wrong
I'm
with you?
soaking wet trying to come into her immaculate home.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man,
Kids in rain. Well, kids like rain.
Man, she put it on me that day.
I just remember when I came to California in 1980, I came in the middle of winter in February back in the Midwest. So I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm not staying in the Midwest another day. Sun hasn't come out in 30 days, snowing, 20 degrees below zero. I'm leaving. This is it. I'm going. I just watched the Rose Bowl again. I said, it's happy. It's sunny out there. I'm going to California, like every Midwesterner does. Got my car, drove to California, got a job first month doing something, selling insurance or something.
Yeah.
And I went into the office. It was raining. Nobody was there. I said, the one guy who was there, I said, where's everybody? I said, it's raining. I said, it's raining. Yeah. I said, it's snowing back where I came from. Here, there's 5 feet of snow on the ground. Oh, no, people, if it rains, they stay home. Why bother? Go. It's only going to last a day or two. I'll go. I'll come in tomorrow.
Yeah, but again, I was in a meeting one day for an insurance company, and it was raining cats and dogs. And we're in this conference room, and they were talking about the sales numbers and touched on exactly what you're talking about. Hey, it's raining. A lot of people don't do business in the rain.
Don't do it.
However, a lot of people are at home. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, I don't do business in the rain. So just based on the conversation, I had to ask myself, why don't I do business in the rain?
Yeah, not going out today. It's raining.
But it had everything to do with when I was a 10-year-old kid, and I had that popsicle stick, and my mother chastised me to the point where I never wanted to go out into the rain again.
It's mom's fault.
Yeah, and so in that meeting, it was like I had an aha moment. And since then, man, I love the rain. Why? Because I would do so much business when it was raining outside.
I'll bet, yeah, because nobody calls. So here we are. It's been raining for a couple of days. People have been depressed here in California. Whenever it rains.
Not everybody.
Not everybody. Some people see opportunity when everybody else sees dark weather. And those are the difference between the winners and the losers, I guess, here. And so I said, finally over the rain, but maybe it will rain information
Well, I tell you what, I like that segue. We're going to talk about today.
or rain money. Yeah,
I was reading this article.
kind of like what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, I was reading this article by the Washington Post, man. It came out back in November 2023. And they were talking about the importance of having an inheritance. And so for me, even today, the word of the day is inheritance. Because it literally, that single word is the difference between income inequality and poverty or prosperity.
Generational wealth.
It's generational wealth. And again, it goes back to 80% of the population, they don't even have that word in their lexicon.
No.
They're not even thinking about it. 1 in 5 people in the United States will receive an inheritance.
Is that it?
1 in 5.
Wow.
1 in 5. And so when you look at that wealth gap, whether you call it a wealth gap or the racial wealth gap, everything points back to the inheritance. Mm-hmm. And it blew my mind. Here's the thing. When I say 1 in 5% of people, Americans, receive an inheritance, or I'll say 80%, I'm not pulling that figure out of the air. All of these numbers, you can go to the Federal Reserve website.
Really?
And they do a study. It's a consumer study. And they do these focus groups from different universities. And they come up with the numbers. And again, I'm not making this stuff up. You can literally go to the Federal Reserve website and look these numbers up.
You know what? It's funny because I grew up. I'm a little older than you are, probably a bunch older than you are, and my dad came from poverty. My dad came from immigrants. My dad came from the inner city and working in the factory and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And there was one message that they all tried to say is, big or little, we're going to leave you something.
We're going to leave you something. Exactly.
Something. A house, a business, $100, something. That meant a lot to him. And I never thought much about it until he passed away 10 years ago. He left me a very nice house, left me a little bit of money, and not enough to quit and live on. But by God, it makes up for all those rainy days I was just playing and not making money and saving money here. I mean, it makes up a lot. And I thought, I didn't appreciate it then. He used to say, you don't save any money. You're like everybody. You just spend everything you got,
right,
and you're not saving any money. And you're banking on me to leave you something here. And I guess I was. I mean, I'm glad he did. And it makes it. I can't tell you what a difference that will make for the remainder of my life. I have a house to live in if I want, or sell.
Yes.
And the houses are appreciated so much.
Yes.
That's significantly more than I thought it would be.
Yes.
And I thought, wow. But why does that not occur to most? We're living day by day, minute by minute. I'm not thinking about what happens to the next generation.
Exactly. And here's the thing. How old were you when your dad passed away and you received that house?
So it was, 10 years ago. So I'm like...
Now, I don't want you to date yourself too.
Yeah,
too
I was in my mid-50s, let's say. Yeah.
So what the study proves is that people around 50, mid-50s, 60, 70 years old, that's when they start receiving an inheritance.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank God I did. And thank you, Dad, for being smart enough to do that. I didn't plan well for my retirement. We all had upheavals and lost 401ks and the meltdowns and other things. And I was always going to save tomorrow. Suddenly tomorrow's here. And I personally don't have much saved. I have equity in my own house, thank goodness, but I didn't do well planning my my last chapter here.
But think about this.
Think
about this. You said it. Tomorrow. Most people say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. But here's the secret of finance. Tomorrow doesn't exist. It never has, and it never will.
Yeah.
The only thing that we have is today.
Boy,
and it's just like if somebody passed away. They're not going to pass away tomorrow. It's going to be today.
Yeah.
On a day called today when they pass away.
That's very powerful. I've never heard it put that way, and it's so true. We're all living for the future. I'll deal with it then. I'll deal with my dad's death then. I'll deal with his estate. I'll deal with my planning. I'll deal with money. I'll deal with my retirement, all those things. So today, the sun is out.
Right.
I'm going to go play.
Right. But, Paul, that's the philosophy, though.
Yeah.
The philosophy of the 5%, you don't procrastinate.
Yeah.
You get it done today. Why? It's not just some ambiguous or something that it's something that's so far fetched that you're never going to achieve this goal. No, there's a thing called the time value of money and compounding. And when you understand how that works, you realize that every day that you put off, you're missing that long-term compounding. And so it's almost like you're getting to the point where you're getting older and older and older, and you start to feel the pressure. Because if you if you know exactly what you need to do, and you know that you're losing all that long-term compounding, eventually, just based on the program that's inside of you, you're going to act. Yeah. Because what most people in the 5% do, they have to force themselves not to create wealth or not to accumulate wealth.
They have to force themselves not to do it.
Not to do it. Wow. I know that sounds absurd.
Yeah.
I know that sounds backwards.
I'm living day by day, paycheck by paycheck. Most Americans seem to fit that black, white, rich, young, poor. Most Americans are on a short-term financial program here.
Well, conversely, people that live in poverty, they force themselves to remain in poverty.
That's a harsh statement because they're going to say, I can't get out.
We don't think about it like that. But, Paul, I mean, again, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
And so it begins with your thought process.
Well, I'll give you again. I know we don't talk about immigrant stories very much. My dad was a children of immigrants. His grandmother was from Poland. I'm mostly Irish, but his grandmother's from Poland. His mother's mother, she dies. I think we've said this before. And so as a little boy, she raises him. Now, Detroit has a huge Polish population. Okay. And the neighborhood she lived in, she was here for 70 years. She came around 1900, died 1970. Never spoke a word of English. Okay. The papers in Polish, the masses in Polish, the signs are Polish. Same thing you'd see if you went down to Little Saigon here or other ethnic neighborhoods here. She just lived in that bubble her whole life. I don't know why she came here, but whatever it was, she had to escape something. She got here, and she lived in that immigrant bubble her whole life.
Yes.
Now, why do I say this? She dies and obviously left zero to my dad. And everybody around him, his other relatives and cousins and stuff, they didn't get zero. This never occurred to anybody to leave anything to anybody, which is hard enough just getting by and surviving. Yes. And they all worked in the factory. The typical, I can say this because I am Polish, the dumb Polacks. Dumb Polacks. And they were the last group that came over in Detroit, and they were the bottom of the social ladder. They were just no good. Dumb Polacks. And anyway, he made a choice, came back from World War II. One choice changed his whole life.
Was it buying a property?
It wasn't buying a property. It was deciding he wasn't going to go back and work in the factory.
Okay.
And so he came back from the war. He was now a bomber pilot. He won some medals. And they said, okay, time to start next week back in the factory. He said, I'm not going. They said, what do you do? We're Polacks. That's all we do. That's all we do. Right. Everybody, the whole neighborhood. We live 2 blocks from the factory. What else are you going to do? Nobody.
Are you insane?
Are you insane? And he said, I don't know, but I'm not going back. And he kept holding out and holding out and holding out. Finally went down to the factory and he said, is there anything other than this? And the guy had a sign up just on a bulletin board, and it said, looking for sales trainees. My dad didn't know what sales was and didn't know anything else. So he said, I'll take it. And he went down and talked to the guy, and the guy had lost his son during World War II as a bomber pilot. So he was sympathetic. Wow. I don't care if you've never done it. I'll recruit bomber pilots. So my dad gets shipped to Fargo, North Dakota. He had to pull out a map. He'd never been more than 5 miles in any direction of this little immigrant neighborhood that he grew up in. And that changed his life. And he ended up becoming a success and rising, became a vice president of a corporation. And we lived out in one wonderful suburbia. And that changed his life. So there was a narrative.
And he left an inheritance.
Critical to him, not just because he cared about me, and he did, because he cared about it. To him, it was a point of pride. I got nothing. I'm going to break that cycle.
Yes.
I don't know what he got out of it, what other personal satisfaction. I'm sure he loved me, and I'm sure he wanted to take care of me, but there was a point of pride to him. I'm not poor. I'm not broke. I'm not a dumb Polak. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to break the chain, and he did.
Yes. But my dad worked for Wonder Bread for 40 years. Right. 40 years plus. And his thing was, he worked. He loved his job. He was a foreman out there. But he grew up in Alabama. And I can remember we used to take trips during the summer going to Alabama, and my family, my grandma and grandfather, lived in a shack.
Yeah, probably literally a shack.
With an outhouse.
Yeah.
With a pump
Right.
for running water.
Wow.
But they had all this property. Had land.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can remember the cows and the chickens and the dogs and the, running all over the place and the giant ant hills. And my dad decided that he didn't want to live that life, because even my great grandmother, who was still alive, she didn't pass away until she was like almost 100 years old.
Wow.
She lived little bit down the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we used to walk down these red clay roads to get to where she was.
Sure.
And she lived in a shack, but it was a little bit smaller. So the moral of the story is my grandmother grew up in a small shack. When she got married, my grandmother and grandfather lived in a larger shack. And my dad decided he didn't want to have the best shack in the neighborhood.
I want more than that.
So he decided to leave. He came to California, got a job. He did some, various works and stuff until he ended up working for Continental Baker, which is Wonder Bread. But he bought a house back in 1971. He bought a house, 3-bedroom house.
And not everybody does that.
And my mother was a teacher's aide. And so back in 1971, they bought that house. I think they paid $27,000 for it. But it was a beautiful house. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward, my dad passed away in 2019, and now he left that house to the family.
And what did it mean to him? Did he ever talk about it?
It meant everything to him.
Yeah, right.
It meant everything to him.
That legacy, that passing it. And I don't know that we think generationally anymore. I don't know that I watch, for example, we're in Orange County, a lot of Vietnamese families here,
yes.
And they come with nothing too. And it's not about my happiness, just a little bit, but it's about 2-3 generations.
Because you have a responsibility. And again, that's the mindset.
Right.
You could hate your family.
Right.
You could never want to be around your family. But you still have that mindset based on ownership and passing it down. Why?
Right. Because
that's how you change the trajectory of your family, by creating generational wealth. And the numbers at the Federal Reserve, they prove that.
Yeah,
they prove it. And when you talk about when it's a breakdown based on race, white people do that better than any other race.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because of the immigrant experience they felt what the need to pass on, or they see that more. But yeah, I hear this all the time. And African American communities, Hispanic communities, other ones.
And the reason I break it down that way is because
pass on generational wealth.
The reason it's broken down that way, the reason I do it, is because that's how the data is broken down.
Yeah,
by race.
Right. So why is it? So in your neighborhood, was that rare to own a house?
It's conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rare to own. Even now, when you look at what's going on in the economy, and people are losing their homes, especially with what happened with COVID. We're in a situation now where the kids are doing worse than their parents.
Yeah.
Used to be a time when your kids did better.
Always.
That was
American dream.
The American dream. We're at a crossroads right now in America. And a lot of people think that they can't afford to buy a home. Mm-hmm. They can't afford to buy a home. Well, this is what the 5% understand. When times are rough, that's when you go shopping.
Yeah, right.
Inflation has to be baked into the equation, because if you have assets, that's when your assets begin to appreciate. So if you're in the lower middle class, or upper middle class, and you think that, we'll say middle class, you think that you can't afford to buy a home, you have to start thinking strategically now. Mm-hmm. What you have to do is put your kids into the position where they can buy a home.
Yeah.
And so now your IRA, your 401k, whatever assets you have, that's what's going to be passed down to the next generation to help them to buy a home.
So I've talked many times about,
and life insurance.
I'm big. Well, that's a powerful one too. You talked about that. I've talked about this before. Immigrant story runs through my life. My dad was children of immigrants. My only child that I adopted is an immigrant from Mexico, and she fell in love with a young Hispanic guy. They've got 2 great grandkids now, and over in Santa Ana they were living, and everybody that he knew, including his family, his mother and dad, and his cousins and everybody, nobody owned a house. It was not baked into the equation. They were all from Mexico and didn't have a lot of money and stuff. And my son-in-law's gone up, and now he manages a bank. He started just as a teller, and he's worked his way up. And there was a desire to do it, but it was always tomorrow. And I pushed him. I'll take a little
There's
credit
that word
for it.
again tomorrow.
I pushed him really hard after they got married, and I said, you'll just stay here in Santa Ana your whole life and living with friends and relatives. Now, he said, well, at that time it was expensive, he thought. I said, however you can do it. If you need help, whatever, let's get in and do this thing here. Yeah. And he bought this little place, and I didn't think much of it, but he turned it into something very nice.
Yes.
The point of the story is we all know, guess what happened over the last 3, 4, 5 years? That little condo that he bought for $400,000 or $500,000 is now worth $700,000 or $800,000 or $900,000.
Exactly.
And he said, now all of a sudden he's thinking, maybe I should do this again, or maybe it changed his mindset. He broke the pattern of generations of people who said, not for us, or maybe it is for us, but not today.
Yeah, yeah. And here's the thing: anybody can do it. Yeah. But here's the thing too: what a lot of the American dream is not predicated upon home ownership. That's a fallacy. That's a marketing ploy.
Yeah. Right.
And because again, a lot of people can't afford that home, but everybody can start a business. Everybody.
I've never heard it put that way before.
Everybody can start a business. So here's the thing: the American dream is based on business ownership. What do we always talk about? Stock market, equity.
Yeah, right.
So it's based on that. So you create a business that's generating a perpetual income stream. Now you go out and buy the real estate or whatever it is that you want to buy. And now you're not trading time for money. The asset that you developed is creating the income to pay the mortgage to buy the house.
So why does some groups,
or to buy the house to pay the mortgage?
My daughter, is Hispanic, and everybody on my son-in-law's side is rather poor and Hispanic, and rather than say we got to get out of this, they shrug and say, well, this is who we are. This is just what everybody in the neighborhood does. And the few that do get out, I don't come back and sort of help us say, hey, we got to do this. Is crazy. My son-in-law went to one of his best buddies from high school after he had this experience, somehow scraped together, got into this condo, fixed it up, and suddenly it's worth double what he paid for. I'm not saying that always happens with real estate, but it happened in this cycle. Yeah. He's now preaching. He's like an alcoholic. He used to go around saying, forget it, I'll do it tomorrow. Now he's telling all his buddies, wake up. And he got one of his other buddies to buy one here.
But that's the point. Every story that you tell as far as a success story, they had to break out of that mold. They had to get out of that environment.
Yep.
So they had to get into another orbit of people that could tell you, no, you can't do that, versus this is how you do it.
Right.
And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be. Here's the thing.
Do it.
Let me change this. Let me change
this.
Let me change what I just. It's easy to do, but it's easy not to do.
Easier not to do, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always easy to put stuff off.
So once you get into the habit of working out, the issue was not the habit of working out. It was getting started. Because once you get started working out and it becomes a habit, then it's hard not to work out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can relate to that. Even you talking about going to the gym. You didn't go to the gym for years, and all of a sudden you forced yourself to go to the gym. You changed your orbit. Now you're around people that's working out all the time. It's a part of their life cycle.
Right.
And now you start to do it, and all of a sudden you get to the point where you're around people that don't go to the gym.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with them.
Yeah.
So when you're around people that's accumulating wealth, and you're around people that's not accumulating wealth, and they don't care about wealth, you can see the disparity. So you can see it.
Let's pivot to the other point the other half of the show here. You're focusing this year on veterans in particular. Yes. You're a veteran. You're a double veteran. I never knew anybody who went in one branch, came out, and joined another branch. That's nuts.
Let me tell you this. If I had the wherewithal, I probably would have joined all 5 branches.
The space branch, and, the Coast Guard.
I probably wouldn't have made a whole lot of rank, but that would have been my goal, to join all 5 branches.
I didn't even know you could. But the point, you said to me coming in today, so what are we going to talk about? Inheritance. And not just for everybody, for all of us, but what's the one group that has more things going for them to build up generational wealth than anybody else? You're telling me veterans.
But here's the thing. I didn't see it when I was in the military, and it took me to get out of that situation and then look back and see the benefits. But the best people that are the people that are in the best position to create an inheritance and generational wealth are people on active duty military, serving active duty military personnel, and veterans.
Yeah.
And I know that seems counterintuitive, because like you're in the military, you're not making a whole lot of money, yada, yada, yada. Or you're a veteran. I hear about these vets being homeless and stuff all the time. How can that be? Well, when you look at what what the average person that's enlisted, they have this salary, but they don't just have a salary. They have all these other things like, let's say, combat pay, hazardous duty pay,
and somebody's paying for your housing, and somebody's paying for your food and your insurance,
the health care, the dental. All of those things add up. And then while you're on active duty, you can still use you can buy a home while you're on active duty.
See,
and a lot of people don't know that.
I would never even think to, because you don't know where you're going to settle down eventually. And yet, there are tons of one of the reasons, if there's a takeaway from today's show.
But here's the thing. Before I forget this, though, again, I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. And I'm thinking or saying that the military, there's no risk when involved in joining the military. That's why they give you life insurance.
Exactly.
So here's the thing.
They don't give this because they're nice. They give this because this is dangerous duty, hazardous duty, life-defying duty.
This goes all the way back to the time of the Romans. In order to get a lot of people to join the Roman legion, what they would do is give them an annuity. That's where the term annuity comes from.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and they would give, if something were to happen to the family, they would have this annuity. It was like a pension. They'd have money for the rest of their life for the family. So even with life insurance, so you pass away on active duty, God forbid, but now your family is going to have $250,000. Based on if you have the understanding and the knowledge, they're going to have $250,000, $500,000, $1 million of income tax-free money that's going to go to that family.
Wow.
If they had the wherewithal to buy the property, now they can either pay that property off or just use the inheritance to make the mortgage payment.
And there are so many special programs, you've hinted at it and talked about it, for veterans: low money down, payment assistance for housing, help to start a business, on and on and on. There are programs the government's put in place, partly to pull people into the military, partly to thank people who are in the military. And I don't know that most people in the military know about.
I deal with mortgage brokers all the time, and it's like they can't believe how fortunate the veterans are, or even active duty, because a lot of times they're not really looking at your credit score.
Yeah.
You know, you can buy a home with a 640 credit score. They're looking at the income. Can you afford the mortgage payment?
Right.
And then when you talk about adding a trust to that equation, whereas, hey, look, you got this property, you're dealing with this mortgage company, and all of a sudden you pass away and the family can't pay the mortgage because it's not in their name, so they end up losing the property.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but what you do is you transfer that property into the name of the trust. You pass away, now you have income going into that trust account to make the mortgage payment.
Yeah, and you avoid the inheritance tax. There are so many tricks. It's not that tough. Why are none of us, so few of us, doing this?
It's about being in the right orbit and getting the right information. And again, it goes back to veterans. A lot of veterans, they can qualify to buy a home. A lot of veterans, again, what they'll get out the military and they have a hard time in the transition.
Clearly.
There's a program called the VR&E program. It used to be called vocational rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. But a lot of veterans they didn't like the name. They wouldn't participate in the program because it's like, oh, I don't want to be rehabilitated, yada, yada,
Nothing
yada.
wrong with me.
Yeah. So they ended up changing the name to the Veterans Readiness and Employment Program.
Sounds better.
You can have a GI Bill, and the GI Bill will help you to go to college. Mm-hmm. Okay, but with the Veterans Employment and Readiness, they're going to ask you, do you have a job? And let's do what we need to do to get you in a position to where you can get a job and generate income, generate revenue.
Right.
So we're going to help you either get a job, we're going to help you start a career, or we're going to help you start a business. And while you're doing that, we're going to compensate you for doing it. We're also going to make sure that, let's say if you need a college degree or you need a certificate, then we're going to provide the revenue, we're going to provide the income to that school, to that institution, so that you can get the certificate that you need, and we're going to also help you with the job placement. And now that you've generated this income, oh, by the way, now we got this this program that you can use to buy a home.
The only thing that's missing to learn how to play this game, and it is a game, is a coach. I don't even know the rules. I don't know where to go. I don't know what kind of bat to buy. I need a coach. Is there anybody who can coach me through this process of how to create generational wealth and to tap into these veterans' benefits? Is there a coach anywhere?
I tell you, there's a lot of coaches out there, but there's one that I'm kind of partial to. And he has this website. It's TyroneFrench.coach.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information. It's a digital app. You go to TyroneFrench.coach. You're going to have so much information. But you're also going to have access to me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That's wow.
So you can text me, you can call me, you can email me with your questions. Matter of fact, we did a last podcast, we did a segment on veterans.
Right.
And this one veteran called me up, and I'm not going to mention any names, but he had a low rating, an extremely low rating. And he wasn't using a VSO, a veteran service officer. And so the people that were giving him the information, they could only give him information based on where they were, what they knew.
Yeah.
So after a conversation of about 5 or 10 minutes, I realized the guy should be at 100%.
Wow.
And he didn't know that he could be at 100%. But I said, the based on his situation, the VA has what's called a presumptive claim. They're going to assume that just because he was on active duty in the job that he was in, based on the ailments that he has, that he got it from the military.
Wow.
The only thing he didn't do was file for it. And man, what he told me, he said, this is one of the best conversations I've had in a long, long time.
Wow.
So I'm going to follow up with him in a couple of weeks, and we got him set up with a VSO, and it's changing lives.
That's what it is.
It's changing lives.
Changing lives one at a time. Starts with changing the narrative in your own head. It starts with changing the idea, I can't do it. Then it's getting over the procrastination.
Getting over yourself.
Yeah.
You're getting over yourself. That's what you're really doing. Because the first and greatest victory is to conquer self.
Yeah.
And once you understand that, and then, also make sure that you understand the compounding effect. Because everything is compounding. It's even compounding in a positive direction, or it's compounding in a negative direction.
And you're not just talking about interest.
Everything in life.
If you do one thing, it turns into two things, it turns into four things, it turns into eight things. If you start down the right path, good things happen. It compounds itself.
That's how every human being on this planet started out, as a single cell that divided.
Wow.
Everything.
Too many of us are divided single cells today here. I don't know. Well, I give it to you from an immigrant's perspective. I heard all the stories. I give it to you a real-life example. The power of inheritance in my own life. It changed my life. It probably saved my bacon because I wasn't planning and saving and doing like I should. And when you tell me about all the programs for veterans, I say, man, this is crazy. They should go out and do it. And if they're not, there's a coach. Call them.
But even as a civilian, Paul, again, the word of the day is inheritance.
Yeah, the word of the day.
I want people to get this word in your lexicon. Write it down on a piece of paper and keep it in your wallet. Write it on a bulletin board, your vision board. Inheritance, because that's the difference between generational wealth and generational poverty.
Yeah. What do you say to people? I've had people kiddingly say this, and I wonder if they're not kidding. I'm just blowing it all, baby. I'm not leaving my kids a nickel. I'm blowing it all. I'm having a good time here.
Here's the thing, and here's the joke. You could be. They asked Howard Hughes, Howard Hughes' estate, his trustee. It's like, well, how much money did Howard Hughes leave when he passed away? And his trustee said, all of it. So you don't have a choice.
He didn't take any with him?
You don't have a choice. Oh. Here's the thing. I have some clients that have the same attitude. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to enjoy it. What I tell those clients, hey, look, at the very minimum, buy a life insurance policy.
Yeah.
Because you're going to spend the money anyway. Right. So you might as well get the life insurance policy, set up a trust, and that's your generational wealth. That's your estate planning. Just those two steps.
And if you care for your kids at all, if you care for your community at all, it starts by taking that step of thinking beyond just yourself and thinking beyond just your life. I look at some of these immigrants that come over, particularly Vietnamese, Chinese and stuff. It's all about, they're looking 2-3 generations down.
Exactly.
We're looking to tomorrow.
Well, here's the thing. Even the Bible says a good man leaves an inheritance to what? His children's children.
Yeah.
So if you hate
There
your
you
kids,
go.
if you hate your kids and you don't want to leave them a dime, then think about your grandkids.
And that's a funny thing because I don't know anybody that, as I'm starting to know people have grandkids. I have grandkids. I've had problems with my daughter from time to time, but boy, I got no problems
You
with
would
my
have to
grandkids.
be a monster to hate your grandkids.
I don't know who hates the grandkids. I never thought of it. Everybody loves their grandkids.
Well,
Grandkids are great.
there's one other thing that I want to say before we sign off.
Yeah.
This study by the Washington Post that was substantiated by the Federal Reserve, their consumer survey.
Yeah.
What they were saying is that when you leave an inheritance, the ones that have more. It's a simple and basic concept, but the ones that have ends up having more. So in the Bible it says, for those that have, what is that? For everyone who has, more will have. Man, for some reason it just left me. But for everyone that has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. Yeah, for everyone that has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance.
Right.
But for those that don't have, even what they have will be taken away. So, not only did the Washington Post, when they did their they did the article, they actually said that, but the Federal Reserve actually confirmed it. That the more you have, the more that as far as an inheritance, the more that it's going to compound. But conversely, the more that you don't have, the less you're going to have, even less in the future.
It gets worse.
It gets worse because the same way that people say, well, I want to get myself together and I want to go ahead and I want to create a budget and I want to have a financial security. But the first thing they start thinking about is decreasing their expenses.
Only thing they
That's
think
the first
about.
thing
I'm
they
going to
think
spend less, yeah.
But that's a bad idea. What you want to do is increase your income. You want to focus on ways to increase your income.
You can't save yourself to wealth. That's not. You can't just be a miser and spend nothing, and alone. You have to have money to save.
But my point is, once you have that mindset, where as you start increasing your income, you automatically start decreasing your expenses, because the same way you have perpetual income, you have perpetual expenses.
Well,
we just don't look at it
when
like
you put it that way. I feel really bad now. Here, I was living the good life, and my wise dad, came along and said, for him and for me, he left me something. Thank God he did. And for all those veterans who are out there blowing every week's check, as you say, hey, I got money to spend. I don't have any housing. I don't have any food. I don't have any medical. I'm just going to live for today. I may die tomorrow. Here, it's a short-term mentality that comes back to bite you sooner or later.
I'm going to throw another term out here.
Yeah.
It's called vetapreneur.
It's vetapreneur.
The same way you have entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you're going to start hearing more and more about vetapreneurs.
Vetapreneurs. Why not?
Because, again, they're starting to wake up and they're starting to understand the position that they're in. And now, think about it. Somebody that has all that discipline, all that training, understand leadership, understand chain of command, and networking, they do phenomenally well in business settings.
Yeah. And they also have a can-do kind of attitude. They
don't quit.
They don't quit.
Yes. Yes. So that's why a lot of corporations will hire these veterans. But again, I'm going to tell you, here's another nugget. When you want to be wealthy, what you want to do is what wealthy people do.
You have all these ways to determine.
But guess
you want
what?
to be wealthy, do what the wealthy people
But guess
do.
what? And again, it's simple concept. But guess what wealthy people do? They hire coaches.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. The great Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of my generation, said, I would not have been here if it had not been for my coach. I was talented, but I could only go so far on my own.
Yes. Well, I tell you what, we're going to wrap this up.
Yes.
But, again, if you want to reach me, go to TyroneFrench.coach or just text me. Just text Tyrone French to 36260.
Maybe that's the one step that'll start breaking the pattern.
That is the step. That's the step.
My dad went down and said, pull the flyer off the bulletin board, so I'll try this.
Well, again, you don't have to see the whole staircase to go up. Go up. Just take the first step.
Yeah, right.
Take the first step.
All right.
But this is one thing. This is what I want people to remember.
Okay.
Always remember that Tyrone French is closing the wealth gap.
That's our show for this week. Closing the Wealth Gap. The one show, the only show that shows you how to take control of your financial future. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net.